Hello, everybody. My name is Duilio, and I'm going to talk about testing today. I have been working on this talk for a long time, and yesterday I was about ready to finish it. And I said, okay, I'm going to pause a little bit, maybe take a break, and watch some of the videos that you have in your excellent YouTube channel. And then I came to this talk that Luke gave last time. And it's about testing. So I was like, my flight is leaving today. I don't have time to prepare a new talk. And then he started talking about his career, how test-driven development made him a better developer, a better person, save the world, all of that. And I was like, great. That's his personal experience. That's not technical. I can still talk about Cypress and what is test-driven development and all of that, until he opened this. And I was like, oh no, let me spoil most movies for you. Hollywood movies, around three-fourths or two-thirds of the movie, there is what is called the all is lost moment. This is from Rocky, one of my favorite movies, completely recommended. And this is when he realized that he cannot possibly beat the champion, right? Because he's not good enough. And then he talks like, well, spoiler alert, I won't give you any spoiler. But yeah, that was my all is lost moment. I said, this is all lost. I was checking for COVID symptoms, train cancellations, flight cancellations, storms. I didn't see there was a strike. That could have been a good excuse. But like in the movies, I came to the epiphany moment where I realized testing is actually a very broad topic. And we have all these books completely recommended as well. There is this article that I have never been able to finish reading, but it's a really good article. I'm pretty sure the ending is also very good. If you can read it at some point, please let me know and how it ends, because I always left 3/4 maybe, and then I start over, and yeah, I will finish it one day. But let's do a quick intro anyway, just in case you didn't come to the previous talk. I'm kind of a little bit OCD. I want to bring another perspective into this. Your application will always be tested, whether you want it or not, whether you write tests or not. Ideally, the test will look something like this, where most of the tests are automated. They are performed by PHP unit, Cypress, etc. Then some of the tests, when you finish writing your code, you added the tests are passing, right? And then you send that to QA, and QA will perform some of the tests, and they may even write more tests. And then, unfortunately, some of the tests, hopefully just a tiny bit of them, will be performed by your users. You have been there, you are trying to book a train ticket, a flight ticket, a hotel, anything, and then the app crashes, and then you are angry, and then you go somewhere else. Best case scenario, you will report that bug, but most of the users won't, because most of us probably don't do it, so your users probably won't do that either. They will just go anywhere else. And this is an interesting fact. The lower that you are in this pyramid, the easier it is to find the problem. If it's an automated test, the problem might be the line of code that you added just a second ago. Code was fine, run the test, they passed, you added 2 lines of code. You think this is perfect, you run the test again, everything is broken. You are like, oh, you go back, you delete the lines of code, you run the test again, they pass again, and then you are in the flow, hopefully. So the lower you are in this pyramid, the easier it is to spot and fix the bugs. And if you leave it to the very top of the pyramid, a user called, the page is broken. Okay, that's a very useful bug report. Yeah, that will take a lot of time to complete. And speaking of pyramids, this is the test pyramid. This is the test pyramid, the one and only test pyramid, where you have unit tests. Basically, what we have here, all the automated tests can be divided in another pyramid. And then you have the unit tests in the bottom part of the pyramid. The integration tests that are also called functional, feature, component tests are kind of in the middle. And then you have E2E or end-to-end tests. They are also known as browser tests, UI tests, etc. Just kind of to be a little bit symmetrical with my previous slide, we also have an arrow pointing upwards, and this increases the debug difficulty, but also increases the confidence. So debug difficulty of an end-to-end test is greater than a unit test, but an end-to-end test that open the browser and clicking buttons will give you more confidence than a unit test, but they will also be more brittle and they will take longer to run. So you gain confidence and you sacrifice these three, and I should have probably ordered that better, but I created all of this in a rush. And I said I was a one and only, and I'm pretty sure some of you were thinking, because yeah, this is a lot of confusion, as Genesis said. This is Google. You look for test pyramid, and this is what you're gonna get. Some of those pyramids were also inverted, and I was like, that's more like a comb, but yeah. This is another moment I like to use this. Who doesn't love XKCD situation? There are 14 competing standards. Somebody says it's ridiculous. The person creates a new standard, and you end up with 15 competing standards. XKCD is great. But here we are imagine two brothers, and they are fighting. Oh, I want a PlayStation. Oh, I want an Xbox. And they are fighting, and their parents eventually buy nothing, and they don't play video games. Sometimes we are like, yeah, this is a unit test. No, it's an integration test. And then at the end, we write 0 tests. So the most important thing is that you write the test, and you can call the unit integration, and you can come with more names. It's fine. Just maybe try to be consistent within your project. I think that's as far as you can go. Be consistent within your project. If that goes well, be consistent within your team. So you know what a unit test is within your team, and then maybe with the company, if you can convince all the teams to start using the same terminology. You probably won't. That's okay. So let's get to it. Let's have a look at the app. This is the app that I use for Laracon EU. And in Laracon, I was talking more about refactoring. But here I want to talk more about testing. But I'm going to use the same app, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. Well, I'm lazy, that's one reason, but I am also going to explain another one in a moment. So I work for a company called Leninvest. It's a fintech company in London, and we build products to give money to people who want to buy a house, maybe to let to other people or to live in the house. So this is like a very simple version, like a minimal version of what I do every day that won't get me fired and that you will be able to understand in a couple of seconds. So imagine that we want to buy a house that costs 100,000 euros or pounds. If you find one, please let me know. And you have 20,000 euros or pounds lying in a drawer or something, and then that's your deposit, right? So you want to find products to buy the house. And this will give you a calculation of 80%. LTV stands for loan to value. So basically you want 80,000, which is 80% of the cost of the property. That's hopefully simple enough. And you will see here the available products. They all have an LTV of 80 or higher. So if you put more deposit, you find 5,000 pounds laying on the floor, then you will see products with 75% or more. So 75, 80, and so on. You put maybe 30K, and then you will find more products, and so on. So a little tip, if you want to buy a house for real, the more deposit that you put, maybe the better products that you're going to get, and the lower the interest rate. I'm not a bank, but that might be true, so you might look into that. So yeah, basically, we build, let's say that you haven't built this app, but you need to work with it, and you need to add a button, maybe to select whether you are an individual or a company. You can make sure the product is still working after you add the button just by, well, basically repeating this, typing this over and over. Maybe let's go back to 25K, and then let's say, okay, we have 75, we have 80, but we don't have 70, right? If I put 30K. You keep doing this, and at some point it becomes kind of like sunk cost theory. You think you don't have time to write a test because you are wasting a lot of time doing manual tests, and you're wasting a lot of time debugging. So we can speed the process up using something like Cypress, for example. So I have Cypress here, and then we can go to end-to-end testing. We can maybe test with Chrome, and then we will run this test. And it will do basically what I was doing manually, but in a matter of seconds. And I don't have time to teach you Cypress from scratch, but I want to show you the test like really quickly, because this is, sometimes it can be daunting, right? But this is very simple. We visit the website, we find some text fields by a label, we type some of the numbers, the property value, the deposit amount, basically what we were doing manually, right? And then we click the button Find Products, and then we will see in the summary the amount of the LTV and the loan amount, and then we will see some available products. In this case, this one, 80%, 75 will not be available. And then we test. Basically, a little tip here is that you can copy paste. We test. The dry principle normally doesn't apply to testing, but with testing it's a little bit, you can copy paste a little bit more and get away with it. So we copy paste this test, we change to 75, we change some numbers just because, and then we see the results that we expect, and so on. So this is what is called an end-to-end test, and this would be basically at the bottom of at the top of the pyramid that I showed you a moment ago. If we go back here, this is here at the top of the pyramid. Okay, but let's go to the middle. Let's see how an integration test could look like. So, for example, I created this little app using Livewire. Have you used Livewire before? Okay. If you haven't, a little bit. If you haven't, it's basically, it lets you make an app, a web app that is interactive without too much JavaScript, or maybe even zero JavaScript. So I have a component for this called product search, which is here. And in this component has everything at the moment. I did it like that on purpose, of course. Not that I'm about developer or anything. I just put everything here. And I have a test for that. And it's in the test folder, feature, product search test. So this test is a little bit more, well, it's in the middle of the pyramid, so it's not interacting as a user. For example, if I go to the views, let's say I go to search, and I open the Livewire component, and I change this label, deposit amount, I just said deposit, and I run the Cypress test, which is here. Let me run it again, and I am expecting this to fail now. Why? Because I changed the user interface. So this test is very brittle. It depends on the user interface to run. So it can break very easily. But if I go to the console and I run my Livewire test, right? So it's still passing because it doesn't depend on that label. Let me fix this, and let's have a look at that test. So we have a very simple test to verify that we can load the home page, and the status of the page is 200, and then that we can see the Livewire component. And then we have another test where we create some feature products, and then we basically open the Livewire component and then assert that we can see the product that is featured, and we cannot see the one that is not featured. And then we have another test that might look familiar at this point. We basically open the Livewire component and we say, we set the property value in 100,000, the deposit amount in 20, and then we assert that we can see the LTV and the loan amount. And then another one where we create some products, right? And then we basically open the Livewire component, we set the values, and then we assert that we can see the products that met that criteria of 80% or more, but the ones that don't meet the criteria don't appear, right? And this test, it's going to run faster than the Cypress test. It won't give us as much confidence, but if it breaks, we know, okay, it's not about the user interface, it's maybe something in the logic that went wrong, and that's why this test is not working. Right? I wanted to mention really quickly that here I have a problem because in the app, if we go back to Chrome, I added these feature products on purpose. I need to maybe, yeah. These feature products that we have here, those are the ones that have the feature flag as true. So in order to make sure that my test is passing when it should be passing, I need to make sure that I am creating the products as non-feature. Because if I, for example, put this product with LTV 79, I put it as feature, and I run the test again, this test might fail. Why? Because the product with LTV 79 is appearing in the page. It's not in the product results, which is all this HTML here, but you can see it's here as a feature product. So you see, because I have everything in one component, that basically makes things more difficult to test. So basically, if we can, I obviously wrote this code beforehand, so if we can go to the next step, is where we basically take the feature component and we extract it as a simple Blade component. So rather than being all mixed up with the search component, now we have it as an individual component. I just get the feature products here, right? And I return a view. And the view is very simple. It's very simple to see. It fits in the screen, and it's very simple to understand as well. I think, can you all see the screen, right? The theme is a little bit different, but it looks okay. Yeah, should probably have asked before, but. Right, so if we go now to the test folder, we can see that we have a new test class where we just test the feature products. How do you test that you can see feature products? You create a product that is featured. You create one that is no feature. And then maybe you add other ones, but I just added 2. And then you load the component, and you basically test that you can see the one that is featured, and you don't see the one that is normal. And that's basically what we have here in the browser. But now we will have, this might be a little bit broken when I created the products, but basically it will only display the ones that have that flag. And at the moment, if we go back to our component, our product search component, we will notice that our featured products are still there. Let's go here. We will notice that we still have some feature products. We have the component. So we have separated the feature products, but we are still including one component within the other. So the product search still has the feature products. We still have the problem that we had before. Unless we move to another, we basically add another refactoring. I need to, mandatory Game of Thrones reference. I need to move to the other step where I have separated the components, and I'm going to show you basically, let's have a look. Yeah, this is basically the search blade view, basically. And now you can see the product search is a component, the feature products is another component, and the search results is another component. And if we go back to the browser, we can see that we have here 3 sections: the form, the feature products, and the list of products. So in the way that we represent that in the UI, now we represent it in our code with 3 individual components. And we can have a quick look at the code, for example, to the component for these 2 are Livewire. The search form is simple. It's very simple. We are just rendering a view, and the view is just an HTML form. Most of it is static. I just had a little bit of JavaScript here. Please don't panic, it's just a little bit of JavaScript. And this is just basically going to emit an event to the search product components to set the property value and the deposit amount. So as you can imagine, in the search results component, we listen to that event, and then we set those properties, and then we have the rest of the code, the rest of the logic that will calculate the LTV, and that will basically eventually fetch the products from the database, apply all the formulas, and it will eventually return the products. Because the components are now separated, we can test or search of products or search result component without having to worry about the feature components or any other component. So we can create the products, and we can create them as featured or non-featured, and it's not going to interfere with the, basically, it's not going to break because these components are now separated. So it's basically divide and conquer. We divide our components as much as we can, and they become easier to test. And that's what Luke was talking about. Like when we start testing, we start finding ways of basically isolate parts of our application so they become easier to test. And that's a great thing. And for example, now we have basically, we have 2/3 of the pyramid. We have an end-to-end test and an integration test. But what about the unit test? So for some reason, I don't know why, most of us, when we are working with frameworks like Laravel, we tend to get too attached. Maybe we like Laravel too much. It's great, I know. And we get to tend to become too attached to the framework. So we want to put all of our logic within our controllers or models or other parts of the framework. And we get, I don't know, it's just, we just get a little bit lost in that. And I'm going to give you a super tip here. If you press Command N in PHP Storm, it must be similar in VS Code, you have a secret here. This is called create class. And this allows you to basically have a blank canvas where you can put your logic that is yours, that doesn't belong to Laravel, that won't be affected when Laravel launches version 37 by the end of next year. This is your logic. So for example, here I am basically breaking what we call the single responsibility principle because I have this calculation of the, I might have gone too far. Okay, as I was saying, I have this calculation of the net long and then LTV is in Livewire. Because this calculation, these 2 lines of code that they are basically simple math, as you can see, they are inside Livewire. I have no way to unit test that without Livewire. I need to go through Livewire to make sure that property value minus deposit amount gives me the right amount. And believe me, and in my day-to-day job, this is like 100 lines of code, and the math is way more complicated than this. So you want a way to test these bits and pieces that are known as the domain logic or domain layer of your application, independently of the framework that you are using. So this is the next step, where, as you can see here, even if you haven't worked with Livewire, basically here I am doing what is known as dependency injection. I have a new class called calculate LTV, and I am injecting that class. And that class, as the name implies, helps me to calculate the LTV. So because of that, I have this calculation as before, but it's now encapsulated in a class. And look at this. This doesn't say Eloquent. It doesn't say Livewire. It doesn't say controller, illuminate, anything. It's just your logic. Well, my logic in this case. But it can be your logic if you start working in this approach. So Laravel got a new version, or Symfony. You might even start working with a new framework tomorrow, and you will be able to pour bits and pieces of your app to this new framework, and they will continue to work. So in this case, I am also using a concept from domain-driven development. Basically, LTV calculation is what is called a value object. It's not a model. It's not a view component. It's just a simple, plain object that has PHP 8.1 read-only properties. This could be private with getters, but it's just very simple. And again, I don't have any dependency. And because of that, we can basically go to calculate Ltv tests. And then we can basically write a test. You can do this with PHP unit or PEST, of course. I haven't had lots of time to get with PEST. But basically, this is very simple. We have a given property value, given a deposit amount, we expect a net long, and we expect an LTV. We create our instance of our class. We call the calculate method. We pass some parameters. We get the value object or data transfer object, whatever you want to call it, back. And then we assert that we have the right values in that object. And then here improvise calculations, which is called as this is called a data provider or a data set. Here we have some permutations, right? This is a little tip, by the way. You have long numbers in PHP. You can use the underscore so they become easier to read. You cannot use a dot because the dot means something else, it's concatenation. So, but basically, here you can add more permutations. If QA finds a bug, you can add a permutation for that. Maybe you can start thinking, how are you going to work with decimals? Do you want to round all decimals? You want 2 decimals, 4 decimals? What's the precision? You can ask those questions to the stakeholder, business analysts, and whatnot, and they will give you the answers, and then you will add another permutation. You copy paste this one, and then you add another one. QA finds a bug. You can basically continue adding permutations, making sure everything is working. And because of that, again, you can run this test, and it's independent of the framework. Right, STF. So with that, we have the pyramid, right? I have showed you the different type of tests that you can write, and how or why are they useful, or what's the problem with them. I have lots of steps here, I think up to 9. So this is kind of like a long refactoring. So this is my Laracon EU talk. It will be available maybe in January, so you can maybe have a look at this. The code is also in GitHub. So if we go back here to, for example, PHP Storm, you will be able to see that the product search results still have a lot of logic that is doing calculations, and this logic is also in Livewire. It also depends on Livewire. So as a little exercise, you can think, well, how can I extract this logic outside? And this is basically what I did in my talk. So let's go back to the topic of testing. Where were we? We were here. And right. So this is something that Luke was mentioning. And I said one reason I reuse the same app is because I'm lazy. The other reason is because when I was working in my talk about refactoring and solid principles, I said I cannot really refactor without tests. I cannot go and stand in front of a group of people not being completely sure that my app is working. Even with the tests, I'm a little bit nervous. Imagine without them. So adding the test gave me more confidence to continue refactoring the app and making sure each step was working. And refactoring the app helps me improve the design of the app. Like, for example, extracting the classes like I showed, extracting simple classes that then become easier to test. So because they are easier to test, you add more tests, you can then add more refactoring, you can continue improving the design, which will allow you to add more testing, and you can continue in this infinite cycle until you get fired, because you are not adding any value, you are not adding any feature to the app, you are just making the code look better, and the client will get really angry because of that. I've got in trouble, so I know for experience. Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about my personal and professional life here, trying to find a new job, all of that. So I have come to this conclusion. You need to prioritize adding value, but you need to have this as a foundation. You need to have a good design with tests that will allow you to refactor as a foundation. And one heuristic that I use nowadays is this phrase by Ken Beck that you have probably read on Twitter. First, make the change easy, and then make the easy change. So if the client asks me for a new feature, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare because all this code is tangled with the framework, testing this is going to be a nightmare, or I don't even have tests for this, then I will come here. I need to improve this foundation. I improve the code within the scope, within the constraints of time, etc., of course. And then when the design is a little bit better, I add the feature. And because I have tests, I know I can always come back to Phi another day. I can come back and I can improve the design another day. So I can add a ticket to the tech dev, and then I can come back, add a little bit of this cycle when I have the time. And when we need to add features, we add features, but we add tests. So the tests will allow us to refactor later. I think normally because we try to be perfect, at least I try to write perfect software that's not going to happen at the first try. And I tried to do it because I was afraid that I was never going to be able to change the code. But once you start adding tests, you know that you can always come back and you can refactor it. So you can just add a ticket to the tech dev, tackle it one day, and it's fine. So remember this, right? You need to prioritize adding value, but you can use these techniques as a foundation to make adding value easier and in a more secure way. So yeah, I think this is it for now. I still have some content, but I would like to know if you have any questions. Don't speak all at the same time because I cannot understand you.
There must be questions, at least one.
When your application grows, you get more and more tests, especially the browser tests. How do you suggest to run those when you try to make deployments or have pull requests, like when they start to get pretty lengthy and run for a significant amount of time?
All right.
Manage that in a big project.
Yes, this is a recurrent problem. And maybe I forgot to mention here, the idea is that most of your tests will be unit tests because they are the tests that run fast. And you are not going to add all the possible permutations that your app can have as an end-to-end test. So maybe let's say you have a field email. It must be unique. It must be this or that, or the password. It must have 16 characters, the name of an actress, the color, 3 uppercases, all of that. You can add maybe integration tests to loop around to make sure that you get, your password must have 3 uppercases, all of that. You maybe integration or maybe even unit tests. And then the end-to-end test, you maybe 1, 2, 3 as a password, and then assert that you can see the error. So now you are confident that the error is going to be shown, and then you can proceed lower down the pyramid to add all those permutations, and then that way you gain speed. But there is no silver bullet for this. Of course, if your app is incredibly complicated, the test will be slow. You might try to run run certain parts of the test, or maybe even think about splitting the app in different microservices. I don't know, just yeah. Any other question? Yeah?
Well, based on the test pyramid that you went over, to me it feels like they all focus on essentially binary results. Either it passes or it fails. Where do you stand on the value of manual testing? Because this has all been using code to execute tests that pass or fail. I'm approaching things from the position of a functional tester. So I look at things and essentially bash a wrench at it and see what happens with it. What do you think the value of that would be based on this pyramid?
Yeah, that's a very good question. To me, QA shouldn't be to basically open the website or the application, see a 500 error, and then go call the developer, hey, this is not working. QA should be more high level. This is working, but are we using the right rates? Or does this make any sense for the end user? A higher level perspective. I really like a phrase from Uncle Bob that says QA should find nothing. This is a goal that cannot be achieved, but we should, as professional developers, we should try to get there. I have a streak of maybe 2 or 3 tickets where QA have found nothing, and then QA comes, and the other day was number of applicants. I put a required, I put an integer, I forgot to check, it must be greater than 0. So QA came, hey, I put number of applicants 0, and the app throws me an error. Oh, then I lost days without QA finding error 0. You cannot get there, but you should try to do that. And that will, at the same time, make QA work on higher level, because if QA needs to be debugging 500 errors, then QA will be stuck on that. And the idea is that you find, okay, this works. We know it works because the developer wrote tests, but does it make sense? Does it look good, etc. So yeah, that's the value in my opinion.
In the back.
Yeah.
Do you use code coverage? And if you do, what do you think of, what's the perfect amount of code coverage you aim for?
To be honest, I don't focus too much on that. Please don't crucify me. Is there a back door? I am worried because we all have this very sometimes intense ideas of what it must be, like you need to have code coverage or you don't. I don't focus too much on that. I think maybe that will lead you to try to maybe test getters or setters. I try to focus more on the coverage of the story. Like I get the Jira ticket that we all love to hate, and I try to write enough tests that all the stories from the client are covered, and maybe even a bit more than that. Of course, in some situations where you have an app that is becoming legacy, there is value in running the code coverage. And if the test code coverage comes back, let's say 60%, there is a problem then. But you know, other developers will tell you the test code coverage needs to be 100% period. And I think, yeah, I don't focus too much on that, but yeah, there is definitely value, especially for legacy applications. All right?
Any last question? No. Well, thank you, Duilio.
Thanks.